The Silent Dominion, Episode 2, The Whisperless Cities. New York City, a metropolis that never slept, that thrummed with 8 million voices, countless engines, the symphony of urban life, now existed as a living museum of movement without sound. Traffic continued to flow, but in eerie pantomime. Pedestrians walked the sidewalks, their footsteps producing no echo against concrete. Street performers played instruments that generated no music, their tip jars slowly filling with coins that fell in perfect silence. But the silence was evolving. Dr. Michael Torres, a quantum physicist at Columbia University, had been tracking the phenomenon since day one. What he discovered defied every law of physics he'd spent 2 decades studying. Sound wasn't being absorbed or blocked. It was being prevented from existing. "It's as if," he wrote in his journal, "the only way left to communicate complex thoughts, reality is being rewritten at the quantum level. Sound waves are being edited out of existence before they can propagate." The implications were staggering. If these beings, and by now everyone accepted that this was the work of intelligent entities, could manipulate the fundamental forces that govern wave propagation, what else could they control? The answer came on day 22. Sarah Martinez, a nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital, was the first to report the new development. She was checking on patients when she noticed something impossible. Their heart monitors were flatlined, but the patients were alive, conscious, and apparently healthy. The machines weren't malfunctioning. The sounds of heartbeats, the electrical impulses, the muscle contractions, the movement of blood were being systematically muted, but it was selective. Some heartbeats remained audible while others fell silent. There was no medical pattern, no logical progression. It was as if something was choosing, one by one, which sounds would be allowed to exist. By day 25, even the sounds within the human body were disappearing. People could no longer hear their own breathing, their own pulse. The world was becoming not just quiet, but utterly, impossibly silent. Dr. Torres made his breakthrough on day 28, working alone in his laboratory, surrounded by equipment that functioned perfectly but produced no sound. He developed a theory that chilled him to his core. The entities weren't stealing sound, they were replacing it. Using modified seismic equipment, he detected vibrations that existed below human perception, frequencies that weren't quite sound but weren't quite silence either. Patterns that seemed to carry information like a language made of the absence of noise. The patterns were everywhere, in the spaces where car engines used to rumble, in the gaps where human voices once carried, in the hollow echoes where music used to play. Something was broadcasting constantly, using the stolen sound frequencies as a carrier wave. Something was sending messages through the medium of silence itself. But messages to whom? And more terrifyingly, messages from whom? The answer came from an unexpected source: children. Maria Santos, a kindergarten teacher in Queens, noticed it first. While adults struggled with the oppressive quiet, children seemed to be adapting differently. They would stand in groups perfectly still, their heads tilted as if listening to something. When Maria approached them, she found they were moving in subtle synchronization, breathing patterns, eye movements, even the way they shifted their weight from foot to foot. They were responding to something she couldn't perceive. Dr. Torres's equipment confirmed her observation. The children were receiving the hidden transmissions. The silence wasn't empty for them. It was full of instructions. On day 35, the first adult conversions began. It started with Dr. Alara Voss, the astronomer who had first noticed the missing stars. Colleagues found her standing in her observatory, perfectly motionless, her eyes fixed on the empty sky above. When they tried to communicate with her, she didn't respond to written messages or physical touch, but she was listening to something. Others followed: scientists, government officials, random citizens across the globe. They would simply stop, tune into the silence, and then never quite return to being fully human. They could still walk, still perform basic functions, but something essential had changed. They moved with purpose, but not their own purpose. They gathered in public spaces, standing in geometric patterns that resembled the formations Dr. Voss had observed in the empty sky. By day 40, Torres estimated that nearly 15% of the global population had been converted. They weren't dead, weren't injured, weren't even obviously changed, but they were no longer entirely human, and the silence continued to deepen. On day 42, Torres made his final discovery. Hidden in the quantum static, beneath layers of impossible non-sound, he found a message that his equipment could barely decode. Adaptation phase complete. Integration beginning. Resistance is individual thought. Individual thought will be removed. The truth hit him with devastating clarity. Earth wasn't being conquered through force or technology. It was being absorbed. Humanity was being converted into something else, one person at a time, through the medium of silence itself. The entities didn't want to destroy human civilization. They wanted to reprogram it. As he wrote his final journal entry before destroying his equipment and fleeing into the underground networks of still human survivors, Torres understood that the missing stars had been more than a signal. They had been a demonstration. Just as the stars had been covered but not destroyed, humanity was being covered but not eliminated, wrapped in layers of alien intention until what remained looked human but served an entirely different purpose. The Whisperless cities continued to function, their populations going about daily routines with increasing coordination and decreasing individuality. And in the growing silence, something vast and patient continued its work, editing reality one sound at a time until nothing recognizably human remained.